So give me some reasons why you guys think there are so many world religions. What you guys talk about? Go ahead, Tori.
I said that like people take things and use it to benefit themselves. So like they'll take words of the Bible, so like it's for them, and then they kind of like make it into a religion, and like other people will kind of like agree to it. So it's like kind of self-beneficial.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Take what I like from this, mix in a little bit of that, mix in a little bit of I just kind of feel this way today, and now I'll, tailor-made religion that I can use to get some people to follow me. All right, that's gotta definitely be some of them. Sure. Give me some other reasons why there's so many world religions. Do you want to talk about the Great Awakening?
No.
For our group, we all discussed. It was like, people just wanted to change it to like make their life
Okay.
basically. They saw it and they were like, well, I don't like that, so I'm just going to change it to my point of view.
Yeah. Good. Good.
And it's Satan likes to distract from the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really important for us to know, guys, that it's not just the influence of Satan on belief is a huge reason for this. I mean, we're Fellowship Bible Church is totally not like a devil behind every bush kind of church. Like, you're not going to hear us talk about Satan that way all the time, but he's real. He's active. And 1 Peter tells us he's like a roaring lion seeking whom he can devour. So like, we do need to be aware of the influence that he has, especially in the way we think. So that's a huge factor. Any other thoughts before we go on? Yeah, Tim.
Well, people like their sin, I think, number one.
Yeah.
And then Romans 1 says, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. And then, talking about God, it says, for his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world. And then it says, for although they knew God, they did not honor him as God. So we like our sin, we see that there's a God, and people don't like that he's righteous, and they'd rather live in their unrighteousness, so they make a bunch of junk up, and they like it.
Yeah. I really, I think that's got to be a huge part of it, because it's just so easy, even in my own faith, to make Jesus all about me, and create all these little lines of subdivisions where I can say, oh yeah, I can do that, because I got this justification for it, and the Bible doesn't really talk about that, so I can have my own little gray area there. And we like our sin. If we're really honest with ourselves, we really like our sin, and it's just so easy to camp there. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
Well, I think too, people have a void, and they're trying to fill it with something.
Yeah.
And when they don't know what to fill it with, they're trying to fill it with things that are going to make them happy and bring them peace, and
Right.
Or whatever they think is going to make them happy and bring them peace. So they might turn to this religion or that religion because they think they're doing good. Sometimes they don't. Some people want their sin, but some people are trying to do good,
Yeah.
and they don't know any better, and they're just trying to fill it with something. They're trying to fill that void that they know is there, and the only thing that can fill it is the Lord. But.
Yeah. I think the average person has a sense that there's a spiritual realm, and they want something bigger than just getting a better house, finding a spouse, living well. Like, they want to be moral people. Most people are in that category. They might live it out in different ways, but they are looking for something to give their lives meaning. So these are all really good things, guys. These are all things that I'm not saying that good things to follow, but like good things to think about. This is why there are a lot of different schools of thought. If you haven't been here the last couple of weeks, we've been working through the Gospel of Mark. We're going to be a couple more weeks still on this. Just a short little account, only 16 chapters, 16 and a half, kind of. Just a really bullet-pointed look at Jesus' ministry. So this is where we were last week. We talked about Jesus' parables. The fan blade is in a wonderful spot right now. Jesus' parables focus on God and his kingdom. They're often agrarian. They talk about seeds and masters and slaves and farmers and things like that. They reveal what kind of God he is by what principles he works and what he expects of humanity. Those who have ears to hear do hear what he's saying. God, there's a mystery we talked about last week that's revealed through the parables. That's for specific ears to hear, and some people just don't understand that. Right? So we talked about 4 parables last week: the parable of the sower, the lamp being hid under the basket, the seed growing, the mustard seed, that little tiny thing that grows into a giant tree, right? And we said that Jesus, when he teaches, is encouraging his followers to bear fruit, shed light, and grow tall. These are the things that are evidence of change. When I'm bearing fruit and I'm shedding light and I'm growing tall, I'm just demonstrating that I'm different, that I'm growing into maturity. They come from the Spirit. It's not something that I do by myself. And as a believer, they're not optional. Like, I can't just say, okay, I accept this, now I'm going to live my life. There's got to be some interaction with this in my heart that makes me different, all right? So that's where we were last week. That was part 1 of Jesus' teaching. And we talked, this is our question running throughout the entire series: am I a disciple, a bystander, or a Pharisee? As it pertains to the parable of the sower, am I the path, the rocky ground, the earth choked by thorns, the good soil? Do I produce fruit? Do I shed light? Do I grow tall? How do I respond to truth? Okay, that's our question. We'll ask it again tonight. But here's where we're going to be tonight. Jesus teaches part 2, and we're going to be talking about sin and religion. So look with me at Mark 7, and I'm going to start reading in verse 1. So if you're not there already, Mark 7, starting in verse 1. Now when the Pharisees gathered to him, with some of the scribes who had come from Jerusalem, they saw that some of his disciples ate with hands that were defiled, that is, unwashed. This is parenthetical material. For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they wash their hands, holding to the tradition of the elders. And when they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash. And there are many other traditions that they observe, such as the washing of cups and pots and copper vessels and dining couches. Right? And by the way, we don't know what a couch is in this context. There's a little footnote in my Bible that says, couch? I don't know what that is, okay? So that's all right. Some kind of vessel they wash, all right? Verse 5. And the Pharisees and the scribes asked him, why do your disciples not walk according to the tradition of the elders, but eat with defiled hands? And he said to them, well did Isaiah prophesy of you hypocrites, as it is written, this people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men. You leave the commandment of God, and you hold to the tradition of men. And he said to them, you have a fine way of rejecting the commandment of God in order to establish your tradition. For Moses said, honor your father and your mother, and whoever reviles father or mother must surely die. But you say, if a man tells his father or his mother, whatever you would have gained from me is korban, that is, given to God, then you would no longer permit him to do anything for his father or mother, thus making void the word of God by your tradition that you have handed down, and many such things you do. We'll stop there for a minute, all right? I'm going to explain a couple things. Here's the first thing we're going to say tonight, guys. Religion is man-made. Religion is man-made. It's something that man creates, and it is not a substitute for true faith. Religion is man-made, and it's not a substitute for true faith. Now, we got these washing rituals, okay? We're not just talking like, I gotta wash my hands before I eat because my mom told me to, and I don't want to get sick, right? This is like this purification ritual that they make really, really important, and they do apply it to washing your hands before you eat. Like, literally, they're like, why are you eating without washing your hands? That's, if I were to like ask you guys to raise your hands and tell me how many of you like wash your hands before you eat and like wash your hands after you use the bathroom and everything, probably only half of you would raise your hands, and then I would never touch your hands again. Okay, this is a real issue. They make it a huge spiritual issue, and there's a theological word that came to be applied to it. It's the word ablution, and we see the idea coming here from Exodus. Okay. This is God giving commands to Moses. When they, that is these priests, Aaron and his brothers, go into the tent of meeting, or when they come near the altar to minister, to burn a food offering to the Lord, they shall wash with water so that they may not die. They may not die. Very serious. Like literally, they will be struck dead if they don't do this, okay? They shall wash their hands and their feet so that they may not die. It shall be a statute forever to them, even to him and to his offspring throughout their generations. Okay, so you can see where the Pharisees are like, ooh, that's a good idea. We should do that, all right? But this is a ceremonial cleansing for the priest. This isn't like God saying, okay, every single person who enters into the temple has to go through this process. There are processes that he's going to want them to go through, but they're missing the point of them, all right? The point of this is not to say you must wash your hands and you must, start with the pinky and then do the ring finger and then, go through the cracks and then break out the nail file brush, okay? Like, that's not the idea. The idea is I got to recognize I'm unclean before God. I'm impure. He's holy and I'm not. So there is, as far as the priests go, when they're doing their sacrifices, there's going to be this ceremonial cleansing process, all right? Now these ablutions, there's that word, okay? They're washing rituals that performed for cleansing from impurity. Such washings prepared people to participate in special acts of religious service. In some parts of the Hebrew tradition, the ritual importance of washing became a central part of religious practice. Okay, so we got this really tiny little thing, okay? God said, do this. You must do this. It is important, but you must do this. It's this tiny little thing. And they're like, okay, let's make this really central to everything we believe. Now everything revolves around washing our hands and keeping these purification rituals, all right? Become central to the religion. And There's practice with minute descriptions of how a person was supposed to wash before various activities, right? Pinky finger first, ring finger. Some of the stricter groups would not enter a house without ablutions. They said one hand had to be washed first so that it could be purified and wash the second hand. Can you imagine like trying to wash your hands with one hand? Like, have you ever had like a really bad cut or something? You got a Band-Aid on, you're trying to keep that hand dry. You're like washing your hand, and like it's not like one of those motion sensing things. You're like hitting it with your elbow and like trying to get the soap out. And, like then you gotta wash this hand after that. It's kind of like that, right? They're like, you got to do it in this way because oh now I touched this hand, now that one's impure, and I got to start all over again, right? They said one hand to be washed first, right? Old Testament teachings do not give such importance and detail to ablutions. Rather, inward spiritual purity is the goal. Outward washing is only a symbol. It's only a symbol. Bless you, Joe. And this is the idea, okay? This is from Psalms. Who shall ascend the hill of the Lord? Who shall stand in his holy place? He who's got clean hands and a pure heart, who does not lift up his soul to what is false, does not swear deceitfully. He will receive blessing from the Lord and righteousness from the God of his salvation. It's not talking about just washing your hands and doing these ceremonial things. As a matter of fact, so he says, he who has clean hands and a pure heart, and then he qualifies what that means. That's the person who doesn't lift up his soul to what's false and doesn't swear deceitfully. It's not the person who spends all his time washing his hands, right? It's this ritual that they make part of their doctrine. And you notice, if you look at verse 3, right, where Mark starts writing these in parentheses, this is holding to the tradition of the elders. This isn't even necessarily from Exodus that they're getting this principle. They're like, well, you know what? Our teachers always did this, and so that's got to be really important. So we're gonna keep following that practice, and we're gonna make it really central to our doctrine. Now, if anybody doesn't do it, they're sinful. Okay, it's a really slippery slope that they're kind of walking on here. This is something that's passed down generationally. Yeah. Not Old Testament law, man-made principle. Does that make sense? Right? I'm going to stop talking about hand washing now. Let's talk about the other thing. Korban. Whatever you would have gained from me is korban. Let me see. Is JD up here? Did you go? There you are. You're hiding under your hat. Can you come up here, man? All right. Let's see if I can explain korban here, okay? So Moses said in verse 10, honor your father and your mother. Whoever reviles a father or mother must surely die. But you say if a man tells his father or mother, whatever you would have gained from me is korban, that is given to God, then you will no longer permit him to do anything for his father or mother. So JD, you're the oldest, right? Yeah. So you're the firstborn. That's great. This is perfect because in Jewish culture, I mean, you're going to be the heir to the entire family inheritance. Okay. Now, I don't want to get myself in trouble, and I don't want to get you in trouble. But I don't know if you've noticed, but your parents are starting to get up there a little bit. Okay, starting to get up there a little bit. Okay. So you might want to start thinking about what that's going to do for you in the future, because eventually they're not going to be able to take care of themselves anymore, and that responsibility is going to fall on you. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So I mean, you don't want to have to deal with that, right? For too long. Okay. Yeah. So what you can do is say, you know what? I don't want to have to take my parents into my house. I'm going to declare 30% of my overall income is korban, given to the Lord. And so for you guys, 30% might not sound like a lot, but like 80% of your income is like mortgage and bills and everything, and it like disappears before it like actually can do anything for you. So 30% is a huge amount of your income. And you're saying, I'm setting that apart for the Lord. Now I've got a legal loophole, all right? Now I'm not responsible for caring for Valerie and Jeff anymore, all right? Because I don't have to do that anymore. Now I've declared it to the Lord. The priests say, okay, that's set aside for the Lord. JD, you are absolved from having to take care of your parents in their old age. How does that feel? Yep, you're okay with that?
Never do that.
Indifferent. All right. Anyway, you didn't. I guess I could have left you in your seat. That's the idea here. Okay. They're creating a legal loophole. They're tearing the heart out of a principle that God said you must honor your father and mother. And in this culture, honoring father and mother meant, and in some degree to our culture as well, it really means taking care of your parents in their old age. The cycle of life is such that you are dependent upon them, and then eventually in their old age they're going to become dependent upon you, financially and even physically. And the Pharisees, in their desire to have wealth for themselves, and their desire to just kind of subvert this law, created this principle that said, okay, well you can declare that your inheritance, the money that you got coming in, is for the Lord, and now you're absolved from having to take care of your parents. All right, you see how they they punched a little hole in there. It's okay. Now here's what we can do. We can get around this the way we want to. Right. It's another tradition, another religious law that they're adding to the gospel. That's nowhere taught in the Bible that should be the way they should do things. Right. And Jesus is saying, you're a hypocrite. You're creating this law on top of something else and saying, this is okay. You can subvert the law of God anytime you want, right? They're tearing the heart out of God's intent. They're tearing the heart out of true worship, right? So again, religion is this man-made thing. It's these traditions. It's these practices that are extra to the gospel. They're not required for salvation, but we stack them on top and say, now you must do these things. This is kind of what religion, in a purely it's what the religious practice does when it's not a faith thing, when it's kind of like a works thing, right? Religion substitutes true heart worship with rigorous moralism. We've got to do stuff, all right? Now, before I go on, I want to be careful, because I'm not. You guys are going to walk away from tonight saying religion is bad. Okay, religion is bad, and to a degree, yeah. But we just did like a recitation, like a liturgical reading, right? And we did some singing, and I'm teaching you guys now. So there are elements of religion that are valuable. There are elements of religious practice that are extremely valuable. As a matter of fact, practical to-dos are really helpful for taking steps to grow in faith and overcome sin. Okay? Setting a rule is actually helpful because it lets me know, okay, this is right and wrong. And now I can kind of guide myself along these paths. These things are damaging to faith, however, when they replace knowledge of God and intimacy with Him for reductive moral code. Okay? These things are damaging to faith when they replace my knowledge of God and my relationship with Him, my intimacy with Him, with some kind of reductive moral practice where I'm just doing things and I'm doing things and I'm doing things. And even though I might be growing my knowledge about God, I'm not really getting any closer to Him because I'm so confined to this box of moralism, of stuff that I got to do. That's religion, right? That's what we're talking about tonight. That's bad, okay? Now, fallen human nature, sinful people, wants to rely upon things rather than relying upon the Lord. This is actually from a book that Tim and I are reading right now. This is a guy named Reinhard Stacy. He says, we tend to profane the holy and sanctify the merely temporal and transitory. Big words, right? We tend to profane what's holy and choose these things that are small and functional and worship those instead. We worship the method instead of God. We come to prefer the structure over the spirit. Why do we do that? Why do we do that? Okay, we can think back a little bit to what we discussed about why there's so many world religions. But why do we prefer this rigorous, moral structure? Why do we want people to tell us what to do, and why do we just want to have this checklist? Why do we opt for that instead of just wanting to know God more? What do you guys think? Give me some reasons why that's where we want to go all the time. Yeah, JD.
It's easier to do a checklist.
It is, yeah. Especially if you're task oriented, right? Okay, quiet time. Got it. Prayer. Got it. Church on Sunday. Got it. Youth group on Wednesdays. Got it. Okay.
They feel safer because it's in their control.
Yeah, they feel safer because it's in their control. Excellent. Tim.
It's easier to gauge my spirituality or my spiritual maturity than I did my quiet time. I went to church and I prayed before I went to bed. To gauge it against a checklist than to gauge it against the fruit of the spirit in my life.
Yeah.
Am I loving? Am I loving? Am I patient? Am I kind?
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to be well, I did my quiet time, so I'm good.
Right. Those things are less qualitative than the other things, because I can say, okay, yes, I did do that. I got it. Patience, I kind of got that. Kind of. Maybe is it a yes or a no? I don't really know. It's much easier to gauge my progress if I've got a checklist. Yeah. Interesting. Other thoughts? I think if I live by a moral code, doing good stuff, I've got my standard, I've got to follow my standard, where I'm responsible for doing enough good things to outweigh my bad things, at that point, God owes me. God owes me at that point, because I've done this stuff, right? I did all this good things to outweigh my bad stuff, now what do I get for it? Okay? That's the way that works. However, if I live by undeserved, unmerited grace, which I do not deserve, now God can ask anything of me, because because He gave everything for me, and so now I should be obligated to give everything to Him. Does that make sense? When I'm the owner, like what you said, Lex, about control. When I control my own moralism, when I'm doing these things, I'm in command of my morality, and God, you just owe me because I'm working for you. The wages that I earned are you giving me something. We understand from Romans that the wages of sin is death, and that's what we've all earned. But when I'm working in a religious system, I'm saying, I can work my way. I can get there. I can do enough good stuff. Okay, and it creates this really this illusion of freedom that I can do enough stuff to get there. By spilling this over, I've got like paint in the back of my throat from the sled. Okay. If I live by a moral code, God owes me. If I live by grace, I owe God. Okay? I don't want to do that. As a human being, my nature doesn't want to go into that kind of system because I want to be in control and I want stuff on my own, right? Let's move on. Number 2. So religion is man-made. It's not a substitute for faith. And religion cannot fix my sinful heart. Religion cannot fix my sinful heart. And we know the heart is incredibly sinful from Jeremiah, because he says the heart is deceitful above all things, desperately sick. Who can understand it? And then God says, I, the Lord, search the heart, and I test the mind to give to every man according to his ways, according to the fruit of his deeds. The heart is desperately wicked. It's desperately sinful. And religion cannot fix a sinful heart. Let's read on a little bit, all right? So look back at the text. We're going to start in verse 14. And he, that is Jesus, called the people to him again and said to them, Hear me, all of you, and understand. There's nothing outside a person that by going into him can defile him. But the things that come out of a person are what defile him. And when he'd entered the house and left the people, his disciples asked him about this parable. And he said to them, Then are you also without understanding? Do you not see that whatever goes into a person from outside cannot defile him, since it enters not his heart but his stomach and is expelled? Okay. Thus he declared all foods clean. And he said, What comes out of a person is what defiles him. From within, out of the heart of man, come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, coveting, wickedness, deceit, sensuality, envy, slander, pride, foolishness. All of these evil things come from within and they defile a person. Jesus says it's not what you put in that defiles you, it's what comes out. Your heart reveals that you are wicked. Now, Jesus is not saying that we don't need to be careful about what we consume. He is not saying that I can say, okay, everything's good, I can take whatever I want, right? That's not what he's saying. He's saying that my sinful desires come from within, and so if I have sinful desires within, I'm going to consume sinful things. Okay? My desires come from within, and that's going to be reflected in the way that I act. That's going to be reflected in the media that I consume, the way that I speak to others, okay? The relationships that I pursue. Evil comes from within, from the heart, because it's deceitful and desperately sick. It only wants evil things. All right. Now, religion offers this kind of cognitive self-help advice, which is useless when you lack the ability to help yourself. Religion offers self-help advice, which is useless when you lack the ability to help yourself. How many of you guys seen The Martian? That Matt Damon movie? Pretty good movie, right? Okay. Decent movie. You guys remember the part where, so if those of you who haven't seen it, he's an astronaut, he gets stranded on Mars, it's Matt Damon. Between that movie and Interstellar and Saving Private Ryan, the United States government has spent billions of dollars rescuing this guy. But anyway, there's this one part where like he's like, oh, I know what I'm going to do, because he's stranded there and he's trying to contact NASA. So he goes out in like his dune buggy and finds this old probe. You guys remember this part, right? And he digs it up and he sets it all back up, and like it uses some kind of code that I don't even remember what the name of it is because it's so complex. And he's using that to like communicate back and forth using pictures and like this weird. Do you guys remember what it was called? It was like some kind of weird code system that like it's taking pictures and sending them. So like the average person, if they're stranded on Mars, is not going to be able to use that system to communicate back to NASA. You know, like I mean, the average person isn't going to be on Mars, so I understand that's kind of a moot point, but. It's kind of in that sense, when it comes to my sin, I don't know how to fix that. I cannot fix that myself. Religion says, use this complicated way of living, and you'll fix yourself. But I don't have the ability to fix myself. My heart is deceitful and desperately sick, and there's only one thing that can cure it, and that's Jesus. Jesus is the only one who can cure my heart. Religion can offer all kinds of to-dos and self-helps, and just think this way about God and understand this, and go here and talk to this person, follow this counselor, use this methodology, but it cannot fix the heart. No matter how many systems I try, no matter how many methods, no matter how many books I read, it cannot fix me. Jesus is the only one who can fix me. Religion does not fix your problem. Faith in Jesus does. Religion does not heal your soul. faith in Jesus does. There's an ancient legend where a man became lost in his travels and wandered into a bed of quicksand. Confucius, okay, he saw the man's predicament as he's walking by, and he says, "It is evident that men should stay out of places such as this." And he walks away. Okay. Next, Buddha observes the situation and says, "Let that man's plight be a lesson to the rest of the world," and walks away. Then Muhammad came by and said to the sinking man, "Alas, it is the will of God." And Muhammad walks away. Meanwhile, this guy's like, "Love, love, 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 love." All right. And then Jesus appears and he says, "Take my hand, brother, I will save you." Okay. Religion offers all kinds of thought. Okay, let's observe it from this angle. Let's think about, okay, he shouldn't have stepped here, and then he wouldn't have fallen in. And, we can do all kinds of this this evaluation, but at the end of the day, it's only Jesus that offers help. It's only Jesus that offers help. Okay. We don't need to be better people. We don't need to necessarily think differently about God and our circumstances. We actually need to be rescued. We actually need Jesus to rescue us. Religion cannot fix my sinful heart. Here's our last point tonight, guys. Religion does not make me privileged. Religion does not make me privileged. I can think like the Pharisees, that washing my hands all the time, going to church all the time, whatever you fill in the blank, whatever religious practice it is, you can be very prideful about that. I'm just really faithful about going to church all the time. I never miss Sunday school. I read my Bible all the time. These are things that we can bank our spiritual maturity on. And while they're important, don't get me wrong, we need to be doing those things. That in and of itself is not the measure of spiritual health. I'm not like some privileged, super Christian because I do all this stuff all the time, right? Let's read one more section of chapter 7, and I want to try to illustrate this from here. All right, so from there he arose. He went away to the region of Tyre and Sidon. He's traveling. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know, yet he could not be hidden. Right? His popularity is so much that people are just flocking and following him everywhere. Okay? But immediately a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit, that's a demon, heard him and came and fell down at his feet. Now the woman was a Gentile, a Syrophoenician by birth, and she begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter. And he said to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it's not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." But she answered him, "Yes, Lord, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." And he said to her, "For this statement you may go your way, the demon has left your daughter." And she went home and found the child lying in bed and the demon gone. This is like one of those stories I read, and I'm just like, man, that is just so harsh. It's so harsh. Jesus saying, let the children be fed first. It's not right to give what's holy to dogs. Like that just seems so un-Jesus-like to say something like that. Jesus is communicating that he's come first to the Jews. He's come first to the Jews. They're the people that God has spoken to and led and provided for since Abraham. Okay, he raised up this nation out of Abraham. Jesus is saying, and we have to remember too. Remember we talked about parables and the way that Jesus is almost like speaking past the Jews in a way. It's like they're not going to hear it. They don't have ears to hear. He's like speaking to the Gentiles in a sense, to us in a sense. This is not a statement made without compassion. This is not Jesus saying, "I don't care about you, you're a dog, get out of here." This is Jesus saying, this is Jesus evaluating the woman's faith and saying, "Why should I give to you what's actually for this other people?" And she demonstrates her faith and says, in this metaphor, even the dogs get crumbs from the table. Even the dogs get something. And Jesus says, "You have faith. I will heal you, or your daughter. I'll heal your daughter." The woman is outside the culture. She has no privilege whatsoever in terms of faith, in terms of inheritance in Israel, in terms of anything. She's an outsider, and she comes in and asks for help. She's the complete opposite of the Pharisees who think we've done all this stuff, and we deserve all this stuff, and we are the mouthpiece of God to the people. They're two different things. Practicing a religion does not make me privileged. I want you guys even to think that being a Christian does not make me privileged. I'm blessed. I'm incredibly blessed by my Savior, but I'm not privileged in the sense that I deserve any of this. I do not deserve grace. I do not. Paul said he was the least of the apostles. I tend to think otherwise, but least of the believers. I'm not an apostle either, but we have this arrogance that says, "I did all this stuff. I deserve something." As we deserve nothing. Practicing religion, being a Christian, does not make me privileged. And actually, faith requires humble recognition of my spiritual poverty. Real quick before we're done, I want you guys to turn over to Matthew 5. I want to see this in the words of Jesus. Faith requires humble recognition of my spiritual poverty. Right? This is super familiar. This is the Sermon on the Mount. Okay, Matthew 5, starting in verse 2. Jesus opened his mouth and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. So they persecuted the prophets here before you." Listen, there is no entitlement in this. The one who is blessed has nothing. He's pure. He's poor in spirit. He mourns. Right? There's loss. I mourn for the state of my own sinfulness. Okay. There's no pride. I'm meek. I'm hungry. I'm thirsty. I'm craving righteousness and righteousness alone. I can't be entitled. Tim Keller says that the gospel is only for the spiritually poor. The gospel is only for the spiritually poor. That is the person who recognizes that they have a need, and only Jesus can fill. That's where we gotta be, guys. So when it comes to whether I'm a disciple, a bystander, or a Pharisee in this equation, which one am I? A bystander wants religion because it's a way to see his or her needs met spiritually, and to improve his or herself, to improve his moral character. He's allowed religion to misdiagnose what his need truly is. That's the bystander. A Pharisee wants religion because it's a system he or she can control. Moral law is more manageable than heart change. Moral law is more manageable than heart change. This person has allowed religion itself to be his need. That's the Pharisee. A disciple, on the other hand, wants his sins forgiven, and so he humbly accepts by grace. He recognizes that religious practice is a way to orient himself on the path toward holiness, but it's not an end in and of itself. Right? Which one are you? Do you want religion because it's a way to get your needs met? Because it's a way to improve yourself? Are you here because you think, I just got to work hard and then I'll get better, I'll be a better person? Fill my checklist in, that's what I got to do. Do you feel like this is your right? Feel like you're here because you're something special? You have just this uncanny ability to follow after Christ, and you're a model for everybody else to follow? Or do you recognize that you have a need, and even though you're on this side of grace, you still need more of it every day? Is that where you are? You're a disciple, a bystander, or a Pharisee? Let's close in prayer, guys, and I want you guys to consider that as we go.